You can always find a way to shift the principle, right? So if what you're saying to yourself is causing an emotional reaction, I believe that our emotional reaction is telling us whether we're in alignment with truth or we're out of alignment with truth. And so if what we're saying is, I don't have enough money, and that makes you feel panicked or anxious, well, then clearly you know that that's not actually true. You always have enough resources to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't still be alive, right? Like, just the fact that you're still in existence proves to me that you have always had enough.
Yeah. Any questions before we dive in?
No, I'm good.
Cool. Well, with that said, hey everybody, Andrew here, otherwise known as that guy who wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. And I almost feel like this is going to be a pattern where I say, I've got a very special interview today, because I've got a very special interview for you today. I've got Caitlin Doemner, who she is quite dynamic. In fact, so dynamic, I'm not sure how many things we're going to talk about in terms of like what she does in the world. But I will say we're having this conversation 48 hours after another conversation where we were just talking about business and helping entrepreneurs and kind of in that space. And Caitlin brought up gratitude, and we were talking about personal development, and it was very clear by the dialogue and the language patterns that were just coming out automatically. Oh, Caitlin understands the law of attraction really well, and she is so on top of things. The fact that I learned, certified life coach in addition to other things, like she's on it. She's really got her hands in this world. And I thought, what a gift if I could share her insights and her viewpoints with the law of attraction and anything else with all you. So Caitlin, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the featured interview on my YouTube channel.
Thanks so much for having me, Andrew. It's always so much fun.
Yeah, this is going to be the best conversation. And it's so interesting because like an hour before this happened, I'm like going over what I have to do today. And I'm like, oh, I've got my talk with Caitlin, like what direction do we go in? And I guess the first thing to start off with is you, if I remember right, in our conversation, like gratitude came up, and that's always such an important piece of the puzzle for people with, using the law of attraction and benefiting from it. I guess I'd be curious for people now listening who will actually take notice and really want to hear about this specifically. What has been your experience, like how you learned about gratitude, how you've put it into your life, and the kind of results or experiences that you've had as a result?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I've been doing spiritual work, grew up in a very conservative Christian home, and sort of found my way into what I would consider more universal spirituality principles as part of our personal development when we became entrepreneurs. So for us, the path into spirituality actually came from the world of business. And we just realized, you know what, we need to grow on a very, very steep course if we're going to succeed as entrepreneurs. And so I had these principles in my back pocket, if you will. And then we had probably our best quarter, the first quarter of 2017. Things were flourishing. We had multiple clients. My team was running everything. I felt like I had it all under control. And we went on a 2-week vacation to Kauai. And while I was in Kauai, I realized how burnt out I was. I was just physically, emotionally, and spiritually just completely wiped out. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to my work. I don't want to go back to this, like California. I would rather just live in the jungle for 7 years, raising our 3 little babies and being like Swiss Family Robinson while my credit score clears itself out. And then I'll go back and I'll join the real world. And I was planning for this. I was looking at vans that we could buy. I was literally looking at how we could cash everything out and just live in a jungle. That's how exhausted I was. And I put so much focus and energy into that exit plan that when we did get back to California, within 2 weeks, our entire business had just imploded. We had clients fire us, clients ask for a refund. Another client who owed us about $100,000 decided to break contract, stole the team, didn't pay us. We ended up having to be in an 18-month lawsuit to get the money. And then even then she declared bankruptcy. So it was just this wild experience of realizing that the law of attraction is very literal. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to be extremely specific in what you do and don't want, because
It's
it
like,
it
you want to go to the
hurts.
jungle? I'll send you to the jungle.
Right? I'm going to make it so you don't have an option. We're just going to tear down this house of cards because you clearly don't want it anymore. And here we go. So I remember March of that year just sitting like crying as I'm doing the dishes, going like, what was it? Oh, like, why did it hurt so hard? It wasn't worth it. And like, just realizing like, holy crap, we need to take a step back and actually figure out, what do we want to build? How do we create a lifestyle? Well, how do we create a business that supports a lifestyle that we really love, where we feel free and we feel empowered and we feel appreciated by our clients and we're in a state of abundance? And so really started using these principles on a much more daily basis than we ever had before. There's a great little journal called the 5-Minute Journal. And every morning it starts with, what are the 3 things you're grateful for? What are the 3 things that would make today great? And kind of your I am statement, your mantra for the day. And my husband and I started doing that religiously every morning. And it was amazing how fast things turned out. We got 2 really great clients. One of them was Deepak Chopra. And it really just, it was exactly the kind of partnership that we were looking for. And it just taught me a lot about myself and what I do and I don't want. And really just set better boundaries in my life. But most importantly, it just helped me realize, okay, we need to stay in this place of love, of gratitude, of appreciation. And for me, one of the biggest healing processes was even extending that gratitude towards the woman that had stolen $100,000 from us, essentially. And just realizing, like, sending her blessings. Like, I'm so grateful I had this opportunity. I'm so excited for who I've become as a result of this experience. And just sending blessings in exchange for the wounding. And it absolutely has come true. So she, not surprisingly, she ended up burning through the sales team, and all of those wonderful people came back to us and ended up working for us on other projects and making us a whole bunch of money. At the end of the day, we probably spent $75,000 on attorney fees. So I had this kind of what I thought of as like $175,000 karmic debt that I just sort of lifted up to the universe. And this past summer, as a result of COVID, we got a $176,000 windfall. That was completely unexpected, but it was like strangely specific. It was like what we were owed plus the interest that it took 2 years to show up. And it was such a cool experience to realize, like, everything literally is always working out for us. And if you can't see how it's working out for you, then it just means the story hasn't finished playing itself out. You're not at the last chapter if you can't understand how it's serving you. And that's fine. You just get to be in the story, right? Stories would be a lot less interesting if the hero didn't get bogged down in the sloughs of despair in the middle of the book, right? It's kind of the nature of the hero's journey, is you have to go into the underworld. And so for those of you guys who are listening who feel like you're in the underworld, recognize that this story, whatever you're going through, is probably going to be your $1 million story. So don't worry about it. Just find your way back into that place of centeredness, of gratitude, love, and appreciation. And that will literally be the fastest way out to the other side.
So there's so much I got out of that answer, and oh wow, I definitely want to dissect it. The cool thing about that is, first of all, the whole thing about, like, you wanted to go into the jungle. I think that's a really important point, because a lot of times people don't realize that they're actually putting themselves out in the jungle, or they're attracting that circumstance. And when it happens, obviously a human response to that is like, oh my God, life sucks. When really, what this arc demonstrates to me, or at least reaffirms for me that I already knew, is this works in both ways. And when I'll be kind of my language, just because it's on my YouTube channel, but when the stuff hits the fan
Mhm.
that is often a confirmation that the law of attraction works just in another
Mhm.
direction. And in many ways, you do not want to celebrate the horribleness of the situation that you're experiencing, but you do want to celebrate the recognition like, oh my God, this really does work. And if this really does work, then what's to stop me from redirecting my focus to a more positive direction to get that same universal energetic power behind that mode and behind that direction? And I love what you said also about like this not being the end of the story if things aren't going well, because it's actually a parallel of what I have been teaching people in I'm doing like this 11-day early version of a gratitude program I'm putting out at the end of the year. And one of the days I focus on like being the star of your own movie and seeing yourself in
Mhm.
that way, because besides the fact that it helps you redirect your focus and your intention in a healthy way, it also just, it basically amplifies your magnetic power, because all of a sudden you're willing to be the star, you're willing to be the center, you're willing to recognize like, I really am at the core of this all. And
Mhm.
if I have been attracting any kind of bad stuff, I can just as easily even take 5 or 10 minutes out a day to
Mhm.
focus on the good stuff and attract that. And
Yep.
I love how your answer really encapsulated all of that. And that's also really cool that you gave me the exact number, like the interest plus everything else came back once you open the floodgates in the other direction. How cool is that?
Yeah, it was really cool. And I knew it. Like it really helped me break through a lot of limiting beliefs that I had around money. So historically, I had always paid myself last on whatever was left in the company. And we switched that, started paying ourselves first, and then figuring out how to grow the company on what was left over. And it just, I was always positively expecting financial miracles because I literally did expect, like, until this very specific amount of money comes up, I'm 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 taking advantage of every cent. Like it all is mine. And really owning that in a way that I had never done before. So yeah, you can always find a way to shift the the principle, right? So if what you're saying to yourself is causing an emotional reaction, I believe that our emotional reaction is telling us whether we're in alignment with truth or we're out of alignment with truth. And so if what we're saying is, I don't have enough money, and that makes you feel panicked or anxious, well, then clearly you know that that's not actually true. You always have enough resources to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't still be alive, right? Like just the fact that you're still in existence proves to me that you have always had enough, right? So it's just thinking through, how can I shift this statement so that it resonates with me on a truth level? And we know what truth feels like. Truth feels like peace, it feels like joy, it feels like love, it feels like gratitude. And so you can literally self-direct. Like in my coaching, this is the work that I do with my clients. Is I say, okay, well, let's just look at how you're feeling, what's your emotional state, and then let's look at the belief patterns, that the statements that are causing those, and then let's reevaluate them. And it might be a little bit different, so just a small tweak, or it could be a complete reframe of how you're thinking about it, but it will absolutely change in less than an hour how you're showing up and what you believe is true, and you just feel in alignment. It's kind of like spiritual chiropractic to get you back in alignment.
I like that. I've never heard that term before, like spiritual chiropractic, because what a brilliant way of like putting this. It's like
Mhm.
it's really about like realigning and readjusting, and it really just becomes a thing where, and I think anyone who's had a an adjustment when they've had back pain, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden, you see those YouTube videos where it's kind of freaky if people are worried about it, but like they'll wrap the strap around the neck and they pull the person out, and it like expands the whole spine. And some people like, oh my God, that's scary. But when you look at the reaction of the person, the relief, they are completely at ease, because all that tension that was on their spine, on every single vertebrae, has just been released and everything going. And I hear you say something like that. I hear you describe the process and how simple it is in such, easy time. It really is that easy to get a certain level of relief. And once
Mhm.
you've got that relief, you're open and you're expanded, and that's what's inviting so much more in. And that's why I always see this as, it's an avalanche, it's a snowball, it's something that gets bigger and bigger and bigger once you allow it to become that way. And it's almost one of those things where people like, well, I don't know, it could also go the wrong way. It's like, yeah, it's almost like a mountain has two different paths, and there's always a way to get on one track, the good or the track of the bad. But
Mhm.
it's very easy to kind of shift into what you want and get that result. And
Mhm.
this is so cool. I've never heard things described the way you have, like right now in this conversation. And this inspires me. Like, how can I, besides putting this video up, how can I, share this level of information, whether it's an email or another video or another conversation or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, like, when this was going on, you went from, towards the jungle to like back into like the world that you're really going for. Was there an immediate recognition that things were going well, or was this something more like after the fact, after there was already a lot of momentum, that you're like, hey, okay, there's really something to this? Because I know you already knew that law of attraction worked before this happened, but I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you can spot it as it was going on, or it took a certain level or measure of trust.
Yeah, well, I think it was as all the stuff was hitting the fan. Yes, self-awareness is one of my strong points. And I was like, oh, Caitlin, you can't blame this on anybody but yourself, right? Remember how you just spent 2 hours with a single-minded focus of destroying your existence? Yeah, okay, that's what's playing out right now. So it was absolutely one of those pieces where, yeah, and I think that's the hard thing about when you do buy into the law of attraction and you realize you are in charge of the course of your life. It's frankly a little terrifying. But I think what's been really helpful to me is realizing, like, well, a couple of realizations. So you said, like, sometimes you can get into like the negative vortex, right? And the way I think about it is everything inside of you and all of the spiritual forces that are around you are always seeking your highest good and the good of all involved. So if you just do nothing, you will naturally rise. Like, you have to work really hard to fight the air currents, and try to keep yourself down in a negative state. Like, it really just comes back to, and that really does, is like everything is always working out for me. And realizing that, what's helped me is kind of moving away from good or bad interpretations of the story and getting into preference and contrast as describers of the story. So there are things in my life that I prefer, right? I prefer dark chocolate. I prefer sex with my husband every day. I prefer to have a comfortable house. I prefer lots of money in my bank account. But when there are instances of things that I don't prefer, like my children are screaming and throwing temper tantrums, or we have more invoices due than invoices that are received, or things like that that just come up and you're like, oh, it's feeling, and instead of like bad, I'll use the word, it's feeling tight, it's feeling heavy, right? So these
Hmm.
are more like physical descriptions of the experience. It's like, I almost never say I'm stressed anymore. I will say sometimes, well, I'm feeling a lot of pressure, right? So when I was giving birth naturally, we did hypno babies, and it tells you, don't describe it as pain, describe it as pressure, which is sometimes a little bit hard when you're in the middle of a contraction. But if you can literally just change the semantic interpretation, your brain, it literally changes the physiological response.
Hmm.
So if instead of saying I'm totally stressed out, it's I'm feeling a lot of pressure today. I feel like I have more things that I'm supposed to accomplish today than I think I can reasonably accomplish, right? So it's just stating objective facts and like sensations, as opposed to interpreting it as I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I don't have enough time, right? Because we all, like, Wayne Dyer is my favorite. He's like, the I am statement is the most powerful divine identifier, and it activates power. So when you say I am stressed, you are literally calling that into your existence. If you say I am peace, I am love, I am gratitude, right? You can call that into your existence. And it sounds completely woo-woo until you start noticing that we are speaking creators. Like in Genesis 1:1, it's God spoke the world into existence, and then he made us in his image. So it isn't any surprise to any of us that our words are what we use to speak our world into existence.
I love, it's woo woo until, like, it's crazy, it's unreasonable. It's like, there's no way until you actually see it.
Yeah.
And this kind of takes me to an example I've been using a lot in podcast interviews where, you take a physical thing, like, working out and getting muscles.
Mhm.
And you could explain like it's the muscle fairy that gave you the muscles, or it's you're making micro tears in your muscles and then your body's filling it in with more fibers and they're getting bigger. And the thing is, imagine like hundreds of years ago people didn't understand weight training and they said, hey, if you lift this really heavy stuff you're going to get muscles. They're like, that's too woo woo, that's crazy. It's like, it's crazy until you get the muscles. These things are crazy until the results come that they're so undeniable, where even if you don't want to attribute it to this process or this universal principle, you still can't argue with the fact that you are receiving a result. And I
Yeah.
also love, the example, when you're talking about like giving birth, because, I'm the last person in the world who's going to tell you what that feels like. But if you're talking about changing a language pattern when you're in immediate state of extreme physical pain, oftentimes, then certainly it's not unreasonable to ask somebody who's not in that immediate pain, at least physically, to just take a step back, take a deep breath, look at what's going on, identify the fact that there is pressure, and say, what can I do about this just to relieve it just a little bit and get myself a little bit more on that positive path where I want to go to.
Yeah. And I work with a lot of really successful female entrepreneurs, some guys too, but what I usually am telling them is this: you are choosing this because this is where you grow, right? Like if astronauts are in space where there is no gravity, there's no pressure, their bones, their muscles begin to atrophy and their bones begin to weaken, like because that pressure of being pulled down onto the earth is what allows us to get bone and muscle density. And telling them, hey, like, you would not survive if I told you you had to just lay on a couch and eat bonbons and watch soap operas. Like, you are not wired for this. You are wired to climb mountains, physical and metaphysical mountains, right? We climb them for fun. We enjoy that challenge, but we enjoy climbing mountains because we don't have to, right? So part of all of this journey is realizing you don't have to do anything, right? Survival is always optional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Abundance is always optional. Building a business, always optional. Working a job, as my 18-year-old just started his first week of construction, fresh out of high school, and I'm reminding him, this is an option. You don't have to work. You could be destitute and live under a bridge, right? So we're always in a state of choice. And once you realize I'm in a state of choice, then everything gets back to fun, right? Because kids don't have to do anything, and yet they work so much harder than we do on a daily basis, like running and jumping and swinging and sliding. Like, I don't know if you've tried it, but like, it is hard work just keeping up with a kid, but it's all fun. It's all games. It's all play. And so the more you can start moving away from have tos and should do's, right? And moving into choose tos and gets tos, right? I choose to build a business. I get to have a team. I'm learning to enjoy the experience of payroll, right? So these are the parts where you're realizing like, I need this challenge for my own spiritual and personal journey. I would be completely dissatisfied if I weren't being challenged. And some days it feels more challenging than rewarding, but that's when you are building that biggest muscle. It needs to be, your ego needs to be broken down so that your spiritual self can be built up.
Yeah, it's really cool as you were describing that. What I almost heard you say, I'm paraphrasing you and I'm putting words in your mouth, but it's almost like as if you said there's a beauty to the challenge. And
Mhm.
it reminded me of a book I read probably maybe a year before I even formally learned about the law of attraction, where there was a story that people were like, they were on a tour in Australia and they were like looking at the coral reef, and there was like on one side the coral was it was like dank, and there was nothing special that stood out about it.
Mhm.
And on the other side, it was vibrant and colorful, and it was just like this amazing, beautiful, almost portrait of life right in front. And the people on the tour, like, asked the tour guide, like, why is this so dank and why is this one so colorful? Like, they're in the same place. He's like, well, look at the position. These have to withstand the current pushing at them day in and day out. So they were forced to, and he didn't say it this way, but they basically forced to level up their game and forced to get stronger and bigger and more vibrant. Through the challenge, they were forced to grow or die, so they grew. And I kind of hear a parallel over what you're describing here in a certain way, where, again, you go from the haves to the gets to. And it's also interesting, I know it's my long-winded response to you, but the really cool thing, at least from my standpoint, is sometimes you have those challenges where your perspective is really going to get you far, but also sometimes you even want to be strategic. And that's even like what my book's about. And I know at this point in the youth of this channel's audience, most people have the book anyway. So they know that I preach, like, listen, don't just force yourself to do these tactics. Find the methods in the book that are fun, because you want them to be a choice rather than a chore, because then you'll do them with so much more enthusiasm and so much more joy and so much more consistency, and then it snowballs again. So I love the parallels and how this conversation is like intermingling with, there's so many options available to people to really level up their life, both in their enjoyment and their quality.
Absolutely.
I love it. Cool. So I guess a question here, just to pop up, because I know I'm imagining people listening, especially early interview, and they heard about, like, getting in the jungle. When people are in that moment that they've identified, like, oh man, here we go, and I'm bringing on myself, and I feel like the momentum. What do I do? Like, what would you say to them to help them quickly get themselves out of that and get themselves on a healthier track? And how long would you say this might take? Like, is this something that they can shift overnight? It'll take a week. Like, what should they expect and how should they handle it when they've identified that they actually are inviting what they don't want instead?
Yeah, so an exercise I developed for myself during that hellish recovery period, I call it the resistance clearing worksheet. And I essentially looked at the 22 emotions that are listed in the Abraham Hicks Ask and It Is Given, I think is the name of the book. But she has this list of emotions, and bottom is fear, top is faith, right? And so I literally just moved those onto an Excel spreadsheet and started journaling my thoughts, starting at the bottom, starting with fear, and forcing myself to work up one level at a time. And the whole exercise, the first time I did it, it probably took me 2 to 3 hours, right? There was a lot that I needed to journal through. And then even today, if I'm really feeling a little stuck and I pull it out, it'll still take me about 90 minutes to do a really thorough version. But I just did it so many times on an almost daily basis, going from fear to powerlessness to depression to anger to it sounds crazy. Like, why do you want to go into powerlessness? Well, because it's 1 degree higher than fear, right? And then why do you want to go into depression? Because it's 1 degree higher than powerlessness. So it's almost tricking your body into micro steps. And so if I just said, okay, I know you're feeling afraid and powerless and you're angry at the world because you're feeling like a victim and you just want to lash out at somebody, right? There's no way I'm just going to say, okay, now jump. I want you to feel grateful and I want you to love everybody and I want you to feel at peace with the universe. They're going to be like, they're going to tell me to go somewhere, right? But what we can do is, number one, what it does is it allows those voices to be heard. So the most important thing in healing work is to recognize that every voice has a valid perspective, right? The little part of you who does feel hurt, who does feel powerlessness, probably had early childhood trauma that it's bringing up, right? And we're not going to heal it by telling the child to shut up and go sit in a corner, because that's what caused the trauma in the first place. What we need to do is give that inner child a really safe and sacred space to be open, to be honest, to talk through its feelings of being hurt and abandoned and powerlessness. And then once it feels heard, then we can go into soothing, right? Then we can say, I understand why you feel this way. Let me also just wrap my arms around you and give yourself compassion and saying, okay, and my higher self is going to protect you, right? Maybe parents didn't protect you. Maybe authority figures betrayed you, right? But you as higher self can heal and protect and restore you as lower self, right? And so you can start beginning that dynamic. So it forces, like, some people just want to skip, like, well, I'm not even feeling afraid. I'm just feeling angry and revengeful. And they want to skip to that part of the exercise. I'm like, no, every negative emotion has a taproot somewhere in fear. So you absolutely have to start in fear and unearth everything that you're afraid of in regards to this situation where you're feeling stuck. And you have to get it out. You have to get it said. And even if, like, one for me is jealousy, like, I very rarely, like, jealousy is not one that I tend to feel very often, but I force myself to find something to put on that line. So my fear or my anger lines might be multiple sentences because I've got a lot that I need to say on those topics. My jealousy might be one like, I'm really jealous that my friend doesn't have to work because her husband is working and I have to have 20 people's families that I'm responsible for, right? So there might be that comes up. So it's just acknowledging that you can find every facet in you at all times. Like, you are a multidimensional being. And it's important to realize that these lower emotions are not bad. They're not negative. They just are. It's like you wouldn't get angry at the check engine light on your car when it came up. You also wouldn't put black tape over it and pretend it's not there, right? You'd say, oh, this is a really useful indicator that something is off. Let me pop the hood, see what's going on so we can fix it. And so this resistance clearing exercise, I'm happy to give you the PDF to make available, is it's just about moving you closer in little micro dials up higher. And then between boredom and contentment, there's a big black line. And I'm like, whatever you do, do not stop until you cross the big black line. Otherwise, you'll want to throw yourself off a bridge because it definitely gets worse before it gets better. And then you can go from boredom into contentment, into positive expectation, into all of the higher frequency emotions. But by the end, in a 90-minute session with myself, I can go from abject fear, depression, and anxiety and anger all the way up to joy and gratitude and love and faith. And it really feels miraculous because literally nothing external has changed in 90 minutes. Never has the external circumstance that I've been relating to ever changed in that 90-minute window, but I have changed completely during that time frame.
Right. It's so interesting and cool hearing that answer. And I pick a bunch of things out of it. Well, one, it's so funny because, like, I'm aware of the emotions, the emotional scale. And there's people that can do it like you, and there's people that struggle. And like, it's so funny for me because I that's such a valid way of doing it. And me, I usually do a gratitude blitz where it's like, I'm not even gonna look at, I'm just gonna like look at all these good things and fill my attention with all this. So I love the fact that my viewers right now are seeing these two different perspectives, two different pathways of getting there. I also love the message that you had in there of, I think oftentimes we put a pressure on ourselves to go from A to Z instead of A to B. Like the path to Z is B, C, D, E, F, and forward, and giving yourself that permission to be at that letter on that scale as you're getting to the destination, because that's almost like the key to doing it. The key to making the jump to Z is not trying to jump. And it's just pushing your way through. And the other thing that I loved about that answer was, like, you know, the willingness to acknowledge a jealousy or a resentment, even though you didn't use that word, of like, here you are, this extremely successful person where, yeah, there's a responsibility of 20 people working for you where they're depending on you and your ability to manage them and manage the company so that they can get their paycheck and they can provide for themselves and their families. That could be an incredible responsibility. And it's really important to kind of see all the sides, like, wow, I need to acknowledge if I have an emotion around that, but also I need to say, like, well, hey, it's great that I'm a successful person. And oftentimes, like, I'll have things through my success, which is different than yours. And, you know, in scale and experience and this and that, but there are times where something will happen that I don't agree with or I don't like, but it's clearly as an offshoot of the level of success that I achieved in a certain area of my business or my life. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, listen, this is the game, and I don't have to invite that every single time. But the fact that I did, I'm just going to take that like, okay, let's move on. Let's not let that beat me up. Let me
Mhm.
just, pack that, understand what it is, and move forward with it.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving such a thorough answer and such a deep way of doing it. This kind of leads me to another piece, because that's obviously an answer to people that they identified this issue and they want to find a way around it.
Mhm.
And they've got, the scale or my blitz or whatever is going to work for them.
Mhm.
I'm curious, you mentioned the 5-minute journal when you were making your comeback, so to speak.
Yeah.
What, if anything, do you do on a regular daily basis today to keep yourself in that positive state, that flow, so that
Mhm.
you're continuing to invite happiness and success and fulfillment and satisfaction?
It's a really great question. And this is actually the area where I just did my own intention wheel for Q4. And where in my spirituality portion, I was like, it really is coming down to daily habits, right? I really feel connected to source. I feel like I'm growing at a nice state. What's going to maintain this is my daily habits. So we start in the morning. I actually created my own kind of energy clearing, visualization, meditation sort of. I kind of lumped all my favorite modalities into a 20-minute MP3, and I'm listening to my own voice guide me through releasing the energy into the ground, pulling it up for the earth, reaching up to the heavens, connecting with source, asking for what I need, and coming back into my body. So that's about 20 minutes long. So I just set my alarm for 20 minutes earlier, which now is like 5:20 in the morning, right? So from 5:20 to 5:40, my husband and I are just laying in bed in the dark, listening to this kind of guided experience. And then we do our workout and then get breakfast for the kids. And so with the kids, we're learning Psalm 23 as a family. So we're reciting that. And it could be a poem, it could be a thing, but I just really love scripture as a way to kind of anchor these truth points in an easy way for the kids to remember. So Psalm 23 is what we're going through. And then in the evenings, I do a journal. And before it was just more reactive, like this is what happened in the day and setting intentions and being very heady about it. But I recently just bought like a watercolor journal. So each picture is really beautiful. And I'm writing blessings. And so wherever I'm feeling like I'm in a rough patch, like I've had chronic hip pain for 2 or 3 years. So one of my journals was blessing the pain, and helped me to realize that the pain is a friend, the pain is a guide, the pain is supporting me in setting better boundaries and taking better care of my health, and coming to a place of gratitude and appreciation for something as simple as a hip pain. And I guess maybe not surprisingly, the next morning I woke up and it was gone. It came back eventually because I don't think I could maintain that mental state, but it was just really kind of miraculous. I actually wrote my friend, was like, I've never experienced a miracle. I think I might be shooting myself in the foot because now I'm doubting that it was a miracle, but I just want to call this out. So whatever it is that's been coming up where you feel like I need a blessing, right? The same blessing that you would pray over your friends or a family member to shift their experience. It's basically just calling in divine energy to shift the situation. And you can do it on whatever is coming up. So that's been my way. My new way of journaling is just crafting a prayer, essentially, of blessing and gratitude around that topic.
Cool. I love that. And, obviously, when I hear you give me that answer, about the MP3, and it sounds like your husband gets to benefit from what you're doing. He just gets the piggyback, which is awesome. You're doing everything on purpose. You have
Yeah.
chosen for yourself a specific process on purpose, and people can do that for themselves, or they can buy a program that they trust, or they can, have an agreement with a friend with accountability. Like, they can do anything where they're engaging in a consistent process
Yep.
that's, I wouldn't say easy, but it's easy. It's like they've almost baked in a certain ease and flow to it. Like you press play. Like there's more to it than that, but if it was just the MP3 and nothing else, you did the heavy lifting of creating it. And then once that's done, you only get to press play every morning. So I love the fact that you've put so much intention and so much purpose and also built in the ease so that that will then fuel the consistency of it. So
Yeah.
this is really cool to hear. Again, see, you're someone, you've never read my book. So your experience of law of attraction has nothing to do with my book. And yet you're doing all the things that I would always tell people to do for themselves. So it's always wonderful getting that perspective and sharing it with my audience in this way.
Yeah.
So we talked about like the identification of, you know, the jungle, we'll call it the jungle situation.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about what you do. So with those things out of the way, just for people listening, if people are like, listen, I want to do something here, I want it to be super easy, like what's one thing you might recommend to someone that you know is going to be easy every single day, that they can, like, there's not going to be much resistance around it, they can just do it and enjoy it, and it'll just like click for them right away?
So funny, I actually forgot one of my biggest ones, the first one that I implemented during the jungle situation. I started listening to hypnosis at night. So finding a law of attraction meditation or something at night. I personally use the Manifesting Holistic Abundance by Michael Seeley. Like that will put me out in an instant now, but I've trained my body to go to sleep. But I was finding that at night was when it was hardest to fight off those thoughts of anxiety, which affected my sleep, which made me wake up grumpy, which affected my day, which made me have a poor night's sleep. It's like this vicious cycle when you're not getting really good sleep. So just going to bed earlier, right? Like I know a lot of us get into the Netflix habit, right? If instead of turning on your television after dinner, you instead go meditate, take a hot bath, like hang out with your family, play a board game, like that sort of stuff. But even if the day was crappy and you're falling into bed at midnight, just YouTube has hundreds of millions of meditations and hypnotherapies and things that are available to everybody for free. Find a couple that work for you. I know some people are afraid of hypnosis. So find one that you want to listen to consciously and say, yes, I agree with this. This feels safe for me. And then listen to it when you're subconscious. But just having somebody reprogramming your subconscious for you during the night, for me, it just seems like the most, I'm like, I love multitasking. It just seems so efficient that my sleep time is when somebody else is doing the reprogramming for me. I don't even have to do anything.
Yeah.
And so sleeping and listening to that sort of audio therapy at the same time, no matter how deep you are, that one you should be able to just, like you said, put your head on a pillow and push play. And it works pretty quickly in
Yeah.
terms of what's happening.
And you know, it's cool, as I heard you say that, it made me think of a suggestion that I've never really given anyone before, at least, you know, I don't remember it, where, like you said, if people are a little resistant to the idea of hypnosis and they don't trust it, you can basically find one of those 10-hour tracks of nature sounds.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then what you can do is you can record yourself on your iPhone. Like we'll use the example of me. Like I'll say, I love myself. You love yourself. Andrew loves himself. I'll do like all the versions of the grammar, put that in a big loop, and I can play that track on top of the nature sounds. And I've created my own hypnosis of a simple message like, I love myself, or a simple message of, I'm so happy and grateful that I make X number of dollars a month, or whatever it might be. So there's ways to even create it for yourself based on what you were talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the best, because you're like making your own little mind movie,
Yes.
for being able to train your body to be in expectation of everything you just told it.
Awesome. So we're doing this on the fly, so I don't know what your answer is going to be. In the YouTube video description of this, I'm going to give 1 or 2 links for people that they want to like connect with you or learn more about you. I don't know if you have a link off the top of your head right now, or if you're going to give that to me after the fact, but if you have something, feel free to share it. If not, I'll just make sure whatever we've got to put it in when I upload this video.
Yeah, no worries. So the website isn't live as of today, but it should be by the time the YouTube episode goes. But it's going to be doemner.com, Doemner, and that'll be kind of our homepage for the various things that we're doing in our life. My husband and I have a lot of different interests and activities that we're working on. And if you're interested, I will include my life coaching as one of those categories. You can click on it and request a free coaching session with me, and we'll see if you can get you a breakthrough.
Awesome. You
Mhm.
know, I wish I had more questions, but you've just like unloaded so much gold. I'm like, I think we're good. I think let me like leave it at this point right here. So Caitlin, I just want to say thanks so much for one hopping on with me again on another conversation 48 hours after one that had nothing to do with law of attraction.
They're
Thank you for
totally
giving
so much fun.
yeah, and it's been so much fun for me. Thanks for sharing what I feel are such valuable ideas and such valuable perspectives that people can really genuinely use to leverage their way towards a lot more happiness and success, however they define that. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for being here today and just sharing your awesomeness.
Aw, thanks so much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching. If you're new to this channel, I've got plenty of other awesome interviews up, but I've also got a bunch of shorter videos as well where I teach new methods, answer key questions, and do my part to make the law of attraction as simple and easy and user-friendly as possible. So take a quick look around at some of the other videos, enjoy, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you again next time.